2018. We are currently in Season 3, Episode 1. It's been a while since our last episode, which aired Saturday, February 21st, 2015. But we are back on the air. Our show can be found around the web. Some really great websites like wolfman.com, barefootbushcraft.com, aroundthecabin.com, Freedomizer Radio, Canadian Preppers Network, American Prepper Radio Network, survivalcentral.net, iTunes, and many other fine websites. I'm your host, the Wolfman, and of course, I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Tori.
Hi.
And in today's episode, we're going to talk about the cold, death-gripping North America. We're going to talk about the Ken Onion Knife Sharpener, and we are going to speak to our special guest, adventurer and Paralympic gold medalist, Karen Darke from the United Kingdom. So I'd like to welcome everybody back to the show, our great and loyal listeners. Very, very happy to be back. We had a whole bunch of beautiful growth going on with Barefoot Bushcraft and all sorts of stuff. So we just didn't have the opportunity and time to create the episodes on a regular basis. But of course, we are doing that now for the 2018 season. So if you're interested in booking any of our great services, archery, axe throwing, cross-country skiing, and now this year dog sledding, you can visit us online at barefootbushcraft.com. So we are going to right now get right into the thick of it, and we are going to talk about the news.
In the news.
In our area, the Niagara region, it's been very, very cold. Actually, there's even ice has managed to freeze part of the falls.
This article, actually, that we're reading was published a couple days ago on December 30th, so last year, and it is published in the Ottawa Citizen.
The bone-chilling, record-smashing temperatures, tens of millions in Canada and the northern United States are suffering through the cold snap, expected to continue another week. In 2018, it's supposed to be even colder. New Year's Eve day in Ottawa, it was a high of just minus 19 Celsius and a low of 28 below. So it's not going to get any warmer anytime soon. That's an actual temperature, folks, not a wind chill. The record low for December 31st from 1938 to 2010 is listed by Environment Canada as minus 26.1 Celsius in 1962, with the January 1st Ottawa record of 1939 to 2011 at negative 27.2 degrees in 1947. 2017 is going to end with the coldest air of the year, Environment Canada said. A fresh surge of record-breaking Arctic air is forecast to encompass the entire province in its icy grip. A trough of low pressure currently over southern Ontario will drop south of the Great Lakes tonight and opening the door to even colder northerly wind. We can also take solace in the knowledge that a huge swath of the United States is also mired in the same deep freeze. The cold front stretches from the Rocky Mountains to the eastern seaboard and as far south as Oklahoma. Freezing temperatures in the U.S. are being blamed on a number of deaths on the road and people exposed to the cold. Icy road conditions in central Michigan triggered more than 30 crashes last Friday, including a pile-up involving 40 cars. South Carolina endured a rare bout of freezing rain that shut bridges that needed to be de-iced. And in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, 2 thresher sharks washed up and they were frozen to death. South Dakota, an 83-year-old woman died from exposure when her car crashed. Earlier, 3 others froze to death near Lake Erie when their car slid off the road. And across the Great Lakes in Erie, Pennsylvania, helplines have been ringing off the hook after the city, 2 hours west of Buffalo, was plastered by a massive 165 centimeters dump of snow. This is a crippling snow event, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service told Reuters. There are no strangers to the snow in that part of the state, but this much snow in that short a time is just unprecedented.
So we're seeing massive amounts of snow, huge amounts of cold. You know, there's an old saying, there's a thing floating around on Facebook. It says that day after tomorrow was not a how-to manual, and this is definitely day after tomorrow type cataclysmic type stuff going on. So when we think about this kind of weather, we have to always be prepared. As bushcraft and outdoorsy type people, I think it's really important that we go through a few things that might help you, our listeners, kind of understand this weather. Obviously, it's very cold outside. We're seeing areas of the world that normally are not cold start to get cold. Although from the north, we snicker about this. I once spoke to a gentleman from India, and he said, you can't comprehend, like, if India had gotten this cold, there are people that live in that country that don't have shoes, they don't have coats, they don't have jackets. The same goes for the South, right? I meet people who come up to Canada and say that they had to buy winter clothes. It's something that they normally just don't own. They just don't have that sort of stuff. So when these areas get cold, it's very challenging for them to recover from this. Now, here up in the north, we sort of say, well, we have to put on our winter jackets and our heavy clothes. But what about driving? When we think about driving in this weather, there's some really important things you can do to keep safe. Obviously, even if you have four-wheel drive vehicles, Jeeps, pickup trucks, whatever, drive it like you don't have that extra capability. If you take your Jeep and you drive it like a car in this weather, you're going to be safe. When we think about inside the vehicle, what we always do is we have a backpack or a bag full of stuff, things that you want to put in your bag so you have them with you, right? Put an extra pair of socks in there. Put an extra pair of shoes in there, some gloves. What do you think? What do you think, Tori? What else could we add?
I think some blankets, some candles, and maybe some, in case you do get into an accident, maybe some type of food that won't freeze.
Yeah, absolutely. Something like food that wouldn't freeze. Even, like you said, wool blankets, good. You can pick those up at thrift stores, right? Candles are another good thing. You get the 2 or 3 of those little tea light candles. Your car slips off the road, like said, that had caused some death this year. You put a tea light candle or something like that in it, and then you're going to put yourself in a position now where even if the car's engine quits, stalls, goes out, freezes, whatever, you can get a little tiny bit of heat in your vehicle. Now, it is important to note that when your vehicle is stopped, your cabin is relatively sealed to make sure that if you have the ability to crack a window open. Although it may seem counterintuitive to open a window to the cold, you want to try to do that so that the car doesn't fill up with carbon monoxide, right? It's colorless, you can't smell it, you can't feel it, but eventually you'll go to sleep and you won't wake up. And then, of course, you will succumb to the cold. Now, this reminds me of something that happens when people enter later stages of hypothermia. So when we talk about hypothermia, the first thing about it is you get cold. That's the first stage of hypothermia. You feel cold. Then you move on to greater stages, which you start shivering, right? Your body temperature drops, the core body temperature, not just fingers, toes, but your core body temperature drops, and it causes strange effects on the body. It's been studied around the world. There's lots and lots of studies online if you want to look at this stuff. Things like, you start to get a blue tinge to your skin as the, non-oxygenated blood or highly oxygenated blood is removed from your skin's surface. But the mental aspect is what's really fascinating. 25% of all deaths that have occurred in a hypothermic state, or people that freeze to death, have been found naked and hiding. As strange as that sounds, it's an odd phenomenon, which was originally discussed to me by the late Dr. Franklin Rule, who was a physicist in the United States, and it's called paradoxical undressing. Paradoxical undressing means your body gets so cold, something snaps in your brain, and you think you're hot. You get so hot, you feel like you're burning up, even though you're actually dying of cold. So what happens is you basically start taking off your clothes. So what happens is you found people, as your brain starts to devolve, you go a little deeper and a little deeper into a form of devolution as your primal self takes over, and you start to burrow. So what they'll find is people hiding under dressers, hiding under cabins, completely naked as the cold takes its effect on you. So it's very, very serious. It's a very strange phenomenon that happens to the human psyche, but of course you can read about that. But paradoxical undressing, again, is when your body gets so cold, you think you're hot, and you start to take your clothes off, and then you freeze to death. It's a very, very serious thing. So make sure that doesn't happen to you. Again, like we'd said, you want to make sure, like Tori had said, put some blankets in there, put some candles in there, make a road kit. As well, when it comes to fuels, make sure you're not driving around on less than half a tank of gasoline or diesel. For those of you that run diesel vehicles, you must know that at anything that gets down minus 10 or colder, you put yourself in a position where your diesel, what's called gels, or the diesel gels up, won't get sucked through the cold of the all the pipes of the vehicle. So you have to buy things that you put in it called anti-gel. Keeps it more liquid in this weather, because diesel is a form of, it's kind of like kerosene, so it gets really thick, rich, and chocolatey in this weather, and it just won't get sucked into the engine block. So be careful out there. Stay warm. Make sure you're wearing as many layers of socks and clothes. Of course, one ginormous heavy-duty layer in this weather. You go out into the woods, cross-country skiing, dog sledding, hiking, whatever the case may be. You got your big, huge, thick, Resolute parka on and not much else on underneath it. You overheat. What's going to happen? You're going to overheat, say, oh my goodness, I'm cooking, sweating. You're going to unzip your coat. Now you're going to get cold. The sweat that had the perspiration that has gotten into the jacket or equipment will now start to freeze. It's going to create more of a problem. Hence the old saying, dress in layers, right? So you got your base coat, which is like your long underwear. You put a t-shirt on over that. Put your pants on, then you put your outer layers, your insulation layers on over top of that. Some people like the old wool shirt, nice and keeps you nice and warm, even if it gets a little bit wet. So be careful and be safe out there. Always think. Got anything to add to that, Tori?
Yeah, just also remember, it's not just the cold, it's also the wind chill that's out there that can make things a lot colder than they seem.
For sure, and I'm sure, when any of you have been out there camping and it's like minus 40 degrees and it's still, you can run around in your underwear out there and you're fine. But, minus 10 with a huge wind chill, it is going to cut right through your gear. Again, that's when the layering comes in, right? You've got multiple layers you can put, it starts to arrest the wind before it gets to you. And again, with the high winds, any kind of exposed skin, cheeks or fingers or anything like that, you are going to suffer greatly. So make sure you're all bundled up as much as possible in this weather.
And also make sure you, like Wolf was saying about layers, just be careful with your fingers and toes and things that you don't end up getting frostbite.
That's right. And of course, frostbite is in its later stages when ice crystals form within the living tissue of your body. Very, very bad thing. All you have to do is look up frostbite pictures on your favorite search engine and you will see black fingers, toes, nose, cheeks from ice crystals forming inside your tissues. So that can be a very, very bad thing. We've talked in great detail and length about layering and all sorts of stuff in previous episodes of the Barefoot Bushcraft Radio Show. So it's certainly something you can look into or just do your own research anywhere on the internet. But again, like we say, dress in layers, keep warm, keep that wind away, and try to make sure that in this weather you can still go outdoors, still have a good time, still run your dogs and all that great stuff. Just make sure you're warm, because if you get injured on the trail, you get cold and fall down and you can't make it back to your car, no one's going to save your dog. So you got to make sure that you're out there to help your dog. So anyways, we're going to move on to the next segment of the show, which is tips and tricks.
Tips and tricks.
So in tips and tricks today, we are going to talk about a really amazing little product on the market called the WorkSharp Ken Onion Sharpener. Basically, for lack of a better term, it is a belt sander. But it is a belt sander that does some really, really great things. As someone who runs an outdoor facility, I have to say that sharpening is not a fun thing. I'm aware that many of you listeners, many people in the bushcraft and outdoor community, you guys love to sharpen stuff. It's like a meditative thing. Every single item that you have is so sharp that you can split a human hair, you can shave with it, all kinds of great things, and you take amazing pride in having your equipment beautifully sharp. And there's nothing wrong with that. Having sharp equipment is having safe equipment. If you have a dull knife, it means you're going to put extra pushing power onto that knife. You can lose control of the blade and slice and dice yourself. Again, in the backcountry, especially in the kind of cold that we're having these days, an injury or a cut or a slice that is going to cause some significant hurt to you. So you want to make sure your tools are nice and sharp. There's all kinds of great, amazing instruments out there and types of stones. Japanese whetstones, soft Arkansas, hard Arkansas, diamond plate, all kinds of great things. However, what has happened was a gentleman by the name of Ken Onion. Now, he is a knife designer, one of the youngest inductees to the Blade Magazine Hall of Fame. He was inducted into that in 2008. Apparently, he is recognized as one of the most innovative and successful knife makers of all time, especially being at his, relatively young age. So he went out there and he said, not everybody likes to sharpen with stones, and that makes sense. Some people, like ourselves, we have 50 knives that we have at the school to sharpen, axes to sharpen, all kinds of tools and equipment that I cannot spend 5 hours or an hour or whatever on each blade when you have dozens of them to do. Especially for, axes, for axe throwing, same thing. So he developed this sharpener, and he teamed up with this company called WorkSharp. WorkSharp's company's been around for a while. They make, of course, different types of implements to sharpen tools. So it's a belt sander, again, and it has a specific size of belt, which are about 1 inch wide, give or take, 2.5 centimeters, something like that. Basically, it spins it at a very nice, slow and even rate. So it spins the belt. The belt has a guide on it. And what that is you set it. It has like numbers, 25 degree, which is the common bevel. And then it goes all up to, like 30 degree or whatever for your scanny grinds. So you set it, you turn it on, you put your belt on it, and you drag your knife through it. And it does one of the most remarkable jobs that I've ever seen. The hardest knife to sharpen that I have in my collection is something called a K-Bar Tanto. I'm sure many of you recognize the K-Bar name, been around for half a century, very popular during World War II. They make knives that are almost impossible to sharpen. You talk to anybody who has a K-Bar and you say, hey, do you like sharpening your K-Bar knife? Everybody will roll their eyes because they're just not fun tools to sharpen. So basically what happens is you buy the device, you set it up, you put your belt on it, you take your K-bar and you run it through, and you'll hear it, like I set mine to 25 degrees or whatever, you run it through 10 or 15 times, and it will put an edge on that blade so sharp with zero effort. And I mean zero effort. Like really, if you can cut a steak with a knife, you can use this sharpener. You pull it through 5-10 times on each side. You pull up your pant leg, assuming you have hairy legs, I guess, and you pull it up, and it will literally take the hair right off your leg. You can then put increasingly finer belts on this thing, so you can go from a hard coarse grit, if you got little dings and nicks in your blade, all the way up to 800-900 grit, very, very fine grit. Put a beautiful, literally a factory quality edge on this blade that is polished. Like it's polished. Like if you can hold the blade up, you can see yourself in it. If you hold the blade down to a book, you can read the text in the book in the blade. It is just an incredible piece of equipment and a sharpener. Now the downside, all these things have upsides and downsides. The downside is these things in Canadian dollars, these things retail for about $200. So that would be about $150 American, give or take, depending on the exchange rate. So it's very much an expensive tool. However, when we do a bushcraft course and we have 10 Mora knives that we have to put a 30-degree scanny grind on, you'll find that you can get that done, all 10 blades, in literally an hour. And these are blades that have been pushed through wood, inappropriately baton, hit nails. They look like they're a fine edge, and they look like a serrated edge. And what have we done? We drag them through this thing at the different types of, the different levels of belt, and you will put them right back to a gorgeous factory finish. It's an incredible tool. I would recommend anybody who has the opportunity to get one of these tools to certainly get one. It will put an edge on it like you could not possibly believe. A lot of people are concerned with the tool that it rotates too fast and will actually heat up the edge of your blade, but they actually designed it to be a slow enough rotation so that it won't overheat your blade and take the temper out of the tip. Now, of course, many people say, well, I can just go and get any, from Princess Auto or any kind of discount factory outlet type place that sells tools, a belt sander, and do this myself. While you certainly can do that, the Work Sharp Ken Onion Edition has a few things in it that will sort of increase your success with using their quality of belt sander versus a conventional sander. A regular sander, of course, is fast, right? So it's going to go faster. Always a possibility of taking the temper out of your blade if you're sloppy with it. The other thing it doesn't have is the blade guard. Again, it has a special guide and a guard on it that you set it to your degree. You pull it through and you will always have the same angle. So you're going to keep your factory angle or put a new angle if you want a different angle on it. So it's a pretty good tool. I really do enjoy the tool. It works really well. We use it all the time. We even have brought it to summer camp once. And at summer camp, we had our 6- and 7-year-olds during knife sharpening day. They brought all their knives and tools to the camp. They run it through, and literally, it was so simple and easy to use. A child could make it shaving sharp. So again, the upside, it's quick, it's fast, it does a phenomenal job. It did slow bands so they're not fast. They don't spin very fast. You can put different types of bands on it. The downside, it is for the average person, it is prohibitively expensive. So there you have it. Some information there about one of our tips and tricks today, which is the Ken Onion Sharpener. We talked today a little bit about this cold weather. Gave you some information about trying to stay warm. We are going to take a bit of a break, and when we return from the break, we are going to talk to our special guest. Again, author and Paralympic gold medalist and adventurer, Karen Darke from the United Kingdom. If you just hold tight, we'll be right back. And we're back for this half of the Barefoot Bushcraft Radio Show, and my special guest today is adventurer, Paralympic champion, and author Karen Darke. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, Karen, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm an athlete currently with the British cycling team, the Paralympic team. I was paralysed in a rock climbing accident in 1993, I think it was now, so quite a while ago. But prior to that, I just loved being outdoors and in the mountains and anything that involved basically being physically active outdoors. So I've had to find new ways to do that.
All right, so new ways to do that. So what exactly happened? And you read on the internet about you that your life changed while you were out during a rock climbing incident.
Yeah, so I was leading a climb on some sea cliffs in Scotland, and I should have let the guy I was climbing with climb ahead of me because he was much stronger than I was. But I was being a little bit insistent that I try and climb the route, and it was just a bit too hard for me. So I reached a kind of overhanging section and realised that I was running out of strength and couldn't hold on anymore. So yeah, I fell off. I fell about 10 metres and hit rock below. The last piece of equipment I put into the rock face came away, so the rope didn't hold me. So it meant that I impacted the rock and woke up 3 days later in hospital. We were told that I was paralysed. So that was the beginning of a whole new chapter in life.
And how old were you when this happened?
21 at the time.
Wow, so that was like you said, a huge life-changing thing. So you were were you completely paralyzed, or only from like the legs down, or?
I'm paralysed from the third thoracic bone, so effectively that's like the chest down, kind of armpit level. So below there, yeah, when I woke up, I discovered I couldn't move anything or feel anything. And of course, for a while, you hold on to quite a lot of hope, and I kept trying to move my toes and looking at my feet and really trying for a long time, actually, to try and regain some function, but no function returned. And yeah, I guess my spinal cord on that basis was completely severed, which means that no connection has really been reestablished.
Wow, that's incredible. So here you are, a very young, up-and-coming adventurer. You have a life of climbing and, all kinds of outdoor activities and things like that. And then you have this horrible accident. So how did, you obviously you have recovered and gone on to incredible and great things in life. So how did you prevent yourself from being just consumed by depression and all the horrible things that go with, basically, from your perspective at the time, just losing your entire life and the way you live it?
Well, I guess I'm lucky in two aspects. One is that I must have the kind of personality that doesn't really get too depressed, and if I get down, it's usually for a very short time, and then I kind of try to focus on what I can do instead of what I can't do, or on what I have got instead of what I haven't got. And I'm really lucky to have some really special friends and family who have always been there for me and supported me through those difficult times. So I think people and having that friendship and that support alongside, I guess, fundamentally a kind of attitude which is about making the most of the situation that we find ourselves in life has set me up well to manage the situation okay, I think.
And make the most of it, you certainly have, right? You've traveled to many, many countries in the world. You've done all kinds of amazing bicycle challenges and things like that. Would you like to tell us some of the stuff that you've done since you have come out of the hospital, some of the challenges and places you've been?
Well, my first really big trip was to cycle across the Himalayas from Central Asia, from Kazakhstan into Kyrgyzstan, and then across a range of mountains called the Tian Shan into western China, and then along the old Silk Road, the Karakoram Highway into Pakistan. That was about a 6-week trip, which I dreamt of for a long time. It took a few years to plan, and we raised a lot of money for a charity in the process. And that was a huge step for me, because it made me realise that all sorts of things were still possible, that it was possible to live a life of adventure despite being paralysed, and it was really very special. And then I guess that just seemed to lead on to one thing and another. I have friends who love outdoor activities, and so friends who are usually up for some big adventures, and I just seem to have a mind that runs wild with ideas. So one of the biggest challenges was a kayak, actually, a sea kayak journey for 3 months from Vancouver in Canada up to Alaska. And that was hugely challenging, not just physically but mentally, because I had to leave my wheelchair behind for 3 months. So the thought of going on a journey with no wheelchair, for which I depend on my mobility, just seemed really outrageous, but it was an incredible journey. The other one that was quite difficult, I think whenever I have to leave my wheelchair behind, it always brings an anxiety, because whilst in reality I wouldn't really want to have to use a wheelchair, it is my independence, it's my freedom, and it's my movement. So skiing across the Greenland ice cap for a month also involved leaving the wheelchair behind. Obviously a wheelchair is no good on remote beaches or in the middle of Greenland where it's just ice, so I just left it behind and used a special sit ski to ski across the ice cap instead. So yeah, they've been some of my most challenging adventures, I would say, probably from the mental perspective of having to sort of sacrifice my independence to be on the adventure, really.
Wow, that's just it blows my mind. That you can do all of these amazing things, whereas many people who have use of their legs certainly don't live that kind of life where they do all those have all these incredible adventures. So what drives you to keep going after all these challenges?
I have no idea. I mean, I guess fundamentally I love being out in the world. I get motivated and stimulated by meeting people and having experiences. I'm definitely kind of an activist and a pragmatist. So when I face situations that seem impossible, I'm usually asking the question about, well, how might it be possible? What could we do to solve this or make it possible? So maybe that's what motivates me. I guess I quite like problem solving, or have come to learn to like problem solving, because it feels like life is full of them. And yeah, maybe there's something about that that's quite motivating. But at the same time, I love being in the outdoors. I love sharing time with friends in those kind of environments. It always feels like you learn so much more about yourself and each other when you're in that kind of having an intense experience together, like you have in the outdoors, rather than just sitting in a cafe having a cup of tea. And that's what appeals to me, really.
I know one of the things we have summer camps and things like that at Barefoot Bushcraft, and we always tell children that nature is one of the few places left in the world where you can go out and you can prove yourself, right? Like you said, you can't really prove yourself on a video game sitting at a cafe. But you can really prove your own worth, see how far you can push yourself when you actually get outdoors. So you said that you were in Canada. You started out in British Columbia. You kayaked up the coastline. So what kind of experiences and adventures? Like did you see things that were super exciting, whales or things like that when you were out?
Yeah, I mean, we saw whales come up right next to the kayak and spurt their breathe right next to us and spurt all their water and smell the fish on their breath. And we had otters climbing onto the kayaks and grabbing our paddles, and just to live so closely to nature and in rhythm with nature. Because the tide went out a long way, we basically had to start kind of living with the moon. So getting up when the tide was high, so we sometimes had to launch very early in the morning or in the middle of the night to start paddling when it was easier for us to get on the water, and then sleep when the tide was low. So yeah, I think just nature's an incredible force. It's very healing. It's very grounding. And for me, I've never really thought about it as nature providing opportunity to prove oneself. But I think it's just the place where we're reminded of the basic elements of survival. Where we're going to get food from, where we're going to get water from, how we're going to stay warm, how we're going to stay comfortable. And those are kind of the basic elements of being human, which often we take for granted in a life where we have a lot of comforts and a lot of things that we have the luxury of having but maybe don't need. And for me, going back to basics is really, really crucial and really reminds me to appreciate the things that we have back in our sort of comfortable world.
For sure. I'm a recreational dog musher as well. And, you spend a couple days out with the dogs in the woods. It's really nice to come to a home where there's an automatic furnace that heats it as soon as it's cold outside. So through all the adventures, again, you've been around the world to many different places. What's the scariest things that's happened to you, other than, of course, the fall that, that changed your life forever?
Well, I've had a lot of close encounters, I think, with death, unfortunately. I seem to just get myself into a lot of situations which are, I guess I put myself into situations which are inherently a little bit risky. So, yeah, a couple of the scariest situations I've been in haven't really been on wild adventures, but they've been related to accidents that I've had since my climbing accident. So, one where I was riding my bike and was hit by a car. It caught my rear wheel and I bounced off the tyre of the car and lost all function in one of my arms for a few months. And just actually recently I've had a shoulder injury which has left me completely lacking in independence and had to move in with friends and get looked after for a few weeks until some of the function came back. And I think when your independence is jeopardised, and for me that's really scary, or the thought of being a one-armed wheelchair user or an unarmed wheelchair user where I'm completely reliant on someone else is that, it takes away another level of freedom for which I'm hugely grateful and appreciative. So yeah, those have been some of my scarier experiences. I guess out in the wild, there's been some potentially scary experiences, mainly with bears, polar bears in Greenland and grizzly bears in Canada, but luckily none of them have ever amounted to anything too scary. So,
wow, incredible. So, of course, travel is very expensive, right? So if you don't mind us asking, how do you manage to fund all these adventures to travel to Canada and across the world?
Well, I often find that traveling is cheaper, or going on an adventure is cheaper than being at home. So apart from the cost of actually getting there and getting home again, when you're away in the wilds, you just simply live on porridge and very basic food, and there are no shops and there's no requirement to heat a house or buy petrol to travel anywhere. Or so I actually find that once I'm away, it's very, very cheap. So usually I spend less money when I'm away on an adventure than I do when I'm at home. A couple of them, obviously, flight tickets have been quite expensive. Greenland was a slightly more expensive trip because we needed to get a helicopter up to the edge of the ice cap to begin the journey. And I've been fortunate on a couple of occasions to have some really great sponsors supporting me. So that's or supporting the team. So that's been really helpful on a few occasions.
Certainly an interesting way to look at it. I know when I have to agree when I do wilderness and backcountry adventures, once you're there, the costs are pretty low, right? You own all your packs and equipment and everything, and yeah, there's not much money to spend on things, which I guess is a very good thing that there's no shops in the middle of nowhere. So speaking of backpacks, I'm sorry?
I just think it's far more expensive than normal life, to be honest, but there you go.
For sure. Now, so speaking of backpacks and equipment, you must have some very specialized equipment, right? I'm sure your bicycles and chairs don't match the ones that people commonly see. So could you tell us about some of your equipment?
Yeah, so obviously to move around in the outdoors, I do need special equipment. Unfortunately, that is very expensive, and that's quite tough to deal with. I work hard, I save up to buy pieces. I've been lucky to have a few grants for it, but on average, a piece of equipment to help someone with a disability like mine be active or do some sports might cost a minimum of, say, £3,000 or £4,000. So I'm not sure what that is in Canadian dollars, but quite expensive. And yeah, it's because there's such a small number of people requiring them, I suppose, and they're all specially made. So I have a special sit ski to go downhill skiing in. I have another special ski that's mounted on 2 cross-country skis, which is for backcountry or cross-country skiing. My bike clearly is a hand pedal bike. You pedal with your arms. So that's got 3 wheels, 1 at the front, 2 at the back. I have a special tandem, which is, again, for cycling. I have 2 wheels at the front, 1 at the back. It's kind of reverse, but I can go cycling with a friend and into the forest on that. So I have quite a collection of equipment. I've realised that I really don't need a house. I just need a very small place to live and then a very large garage to store all my equipment in.
I can completely understand that. I have a large equipment room myself, and now adding things like dog sledding and stuff. Have you tried that yet? Have you been pulled by dogs?
I haven't actually, no. I've been on a skidoo, but I've never been pulled by dogs. I've been pulled by friends. I've been pulled by small children, but I haven't been pulled by dogs, so I'll have to try it sometime.
Something to consider for maybe for a next adventure. Come back to Canada, look me up, and we can go out. So, of course, many of the places that you've visited, including Canada and I'm sure other places in the world, are very, very cold. So I'm sure your body has special challenges when it comes to the cold. So, if you're comfortable discussing that, someone who has lost feeling and movement of limbs, how do you keep them from getting frostbitten or cold or getting damage in those extreme environments?
Yeah, so basically, you're absolutely right. And I'm actually currently nursing an enormous burn on my tummy, which was from a hot water bottle that leaked, and I didn't realise it was leaking, so it spilt its water all over me and caused a really severe burn. So that's kind of one example of how the lack of sensation can be really crucial and dangerous when you're out in the wilderness. So I can't regulate my body temperature. My nerves don't tell my blood vessels to constrict or dilate, so I can overheat very easily and equally can lose heat very easily. So, for example, going to Greenland, the temperatures were quite often down in the minus 30 Celsius, and I was very, very concerned about getting frostbitten feet or legs. So I had special bits of equipment made, some special clothing made. I basically had a sleeping bag on my legs the whole time, which was lined with very thick fur. I had big felted boots that were specially sourced in Finland, where they have a lot of good stuff like that for the cold climate. And I put small heaters inside my boots, not next to my skin, because I didn't want to burn myself, but kind of between layers of socks. So yeah, basically I just come up with lots of strategies to keep myself warm. What really helps is not to get cold in the first place. So if I can prevent my legs, for example, from becoming really cold to begin with, then I can maintain my body heat much more. Whereas once they get cold, it's really, really hard for me to reheat them and to get the circulation going into them again.
So it's very similar challenges then that people that can that have feeling in their legs by the sound of it. You just have to be super extra careful.
Well, I have to be extra careful, but also I'm more at risk of having the problems just because the circulation's poor and I can't feel when things are getting cold and I'm not moving them. So obviously they're just static in a cold environment, so they're much more likely to get cold, whereas if you're moving around and pumping the blood through them, then you can heat things up much more quickly. So it's a mixture of awareness of not getting cold in the first place, or not overheating in the first place, or not getting burnt. You almost develop like a sixth sense. It's like having another sense. I'm usually very aware of what else might be going on that might cause some kind of problem or cold injury or a burn and so on. But yeah, occasionally things go wrong.
Yeah, we had a polar adventurer who had ridden a bicycle across Antarctica on the show a few episodes ago. Her name was Maria Leastram, and she had said that her biggest challenge was getting too hot, where she would bicycle and, you have 50 layers of clothing on because you're in the Antarctic, and as soon as you triggered your body's sweat response, that's when all of a sudden now you're in danger because things can get cold and wet and then cause problems. So I think that's always a challenge, no matter what condition your body's in. So
yeah, I guess I'm quite fortunate because I don't sweat below my injury, so below chest level I don't get that problem. Wow. So maybe there's some advantages as well as disadvantages.
So now, all different adventures have all different challenges. So what would you say was your most challenging adventure, the most challenging thing that's happened to you?
Well, certainly going to Greenland was a huge challenge just because of the temperature variation. In a tent in the morning, it could be plus 30 degrees once we got the stove going and the sun was shining on the tent, even though it was cold outside. But then at night, it would be minus 30 degrees. So you go from waking up with a low sun and at minus 30, you have a 60-degree difference within, say, half an hour inside the tent. And just for me to be in that environment was hugely challenging. Again, living on the ocean in seawater with no wheelchair and the risk of pressure sores or skin damage for the 3 months in Canada was, again, a hugely challenging thing. And it's not particularly tasteful to talk about it, but one of the biggest challenges for people in my position to go into the wilderness is how to go to the toilet. So obviously it's not so easy just to squat and hover and be gone in 5 or 10 minutes. It takes maybe an hour, and you usually need a special seat to sit on, and that might mean being exposed to the elements or to wildlife or to situations that really aren't ideal to be exposed to for too long. So that's always a big challenge. I have an adventure coming up this year to follow the river Ganges from its source in the Himalayas down to its spiritual centre, and I think there are going to be some really big challenges with that as well, even though it's not going to be complete wilderness. That will be quite challenging from the personal hygiene point of view, from me personally going to a toilet, and lots of issues that I need to resolve and think about, which are similar to everybody, but a little bit more exaggerated when you have a disability like my own.
Well, you said environmental challenges, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And then you said wildlife challenges with relieving yourself. And that sounds even scarier. I know, like, when you go to countries like India, I have seen many photos and heard travelers talk about, in the lower sections of the Ganges, there's like, someone's grandmother decomposing, floating by, and things like that. So that's going to certainly be a challenge.
Grandmother wildlife. I'd be more worried about the snakes than someone's dead grandmother floating by. But yes, a mixture of possibilities.
Oh, snakes! Oh my goodness. So of course, with challenging adventures, one of the things that we all go out into the wilderness is to have the rewards. So what would you say was your biggest personal rewarding adventure? Like the thing where you were like, this is why I do this. This is why I'm out here to be alive.
There wasn't my most recent one. I recently cycled from Canada to Mexico, and that was probably my least rewarding adventure, just because it was so hard to actually really be in nature. Even though I could constantly hear the Pacific, you could also hear the drone of American traffic, and wasn't quite what I'd hoped for, really. So maybe, my most rewarding adventures are those where I feel really out there in the wilds. There were a couple of times, there were moments in Greenland that were so incredibly special, where you just skiing across this remote, empty ice cap with no sign of mankind, and just feeling that kind of power and force of nature, and being there in that vastness, which just brings something really special. And of course, there's always those moments where you see that really special sunrise, sunset, or some kind of really beautiful thing in nature, which just is a great reminder about who we are and how small we are and what it's like to be there in such an incredible world.
That's amazing. I know myself, many of the adventures I have, the time where you're most alone and most in the wilderness with no one around is often very rewarding. Now, you went from being an adventurer into becoming a professional athlete. You took up cycling as your sport, and you represented represented the United Kingdom, and you went on to win a gold medal. So what kind of experience was that for you to cycle yourself to the point of near death like most athletes do, and then find out, congratulations, you won the gold?
Yeah, you got it. That about sums it up. You push your body to the extreme, you sacrifice a lot, but, well, for me, a lot of it isn't sacrifice because I love to be active and I love to exercise. But for me, the thing I enjoy the most is the training. I love to be outside, and, for example, to be in Spain in the winter, just out cycling in the mountains and by the sea every day is an absolute privilege, and I love that aspect of my job as an athlete. Traveling the world on airplanes and sitting in hotels and doing race courses in industrial estates in various corners of the world, to be honest, doesn't really bring too much reward. And I'm really not sure that, I'm hugely happy that I won the gold medal, but for me, it's not any kind of symbolism of being the best or the fastest or the greatest at anything. Like, who really cares who rides a bike the fastest? It's kind of pointless. But it was, for me, the kind of pinnacle of a big journey in just seeing, I suppose, in learning and in experimenting and just seeing what's possible when you set your mind on something and you try your best and you have this incredible team of people that join in and help you. And it was really, really special in that respect. Really just feeling that kind of combined effort of not just my own training, but the people that supported me, this incredible bike that I had made for the Paralympics in Rio by a Formula One company, Williams Formula One. And that was really special. But yeah, at the same time, to be honest, it broke me, completely broke me. And I think I've only kind of really felt happy or smiled about having a gold medal maybe twice since I won it. And I don't mean that I wouldn't want it, but it's not really the medal that it was all about. It's the journey there, I think, and the learning and the application and the teamwork and everything that was part of that.
What an incredible and beautifully humble answer to getting the gold. That it definitely, life is about the journey more than it is the end. Now, of course, because of your current condition, you are considered a Paralympic athlete versus what we would consider a conventional athlete, I suppose. So what do you feel the differences are in challenges between Paralympic athletes and conventional athletes?
Well, I can't really fully comment. I've never been a conventional athlete, I suppose, but I think many Paralympic athletes face extra challenges that able-bodied athletes won't face. There's probably a lot more goes on in terms of managing ability within the disability and disability within the ability, if that makes any sense. I think Paralympic athletes are probably, I think they've probably had a lot more experience in life of coming close to the edge, of nearly losing life, of maybe appreciating what they've got. And it was very moving to be part of the Paralympic events in both London and Rio and seeing all the other athletes there and all the variation of disabilities that they have and the huge diversity of challenges, and not just seeing the athletes but also the people that form part of those teams, from family, friends, carers, coaches, everybody that's involved. And it's really quite an incredible thing to, if you imagine if you can't even get yourself out of bed in the morning without help from somebody, if you can't use your arms fully or they're not very strong and you can't walk, and yet somehow you get yourself to training and you apply yourself, that's quite a lot more barriers to overcome than maybe an able-bodied athlete has to. So I'm not dissing any athlete in any way, and I think it's all relative, but certainly the majority of Paralympic athletes are probably walked or, had a more rocky road in life and are more accustomed to overcoming quite hard challenges.
For sure. That would be, my impression of it, is certainly that you have a whole different set of challenges that makes it, even harder. Now, whether you wish to admit it or not, you're a huge inspiration to people around the world. People who succumb to various injuries and become disabled, and they see the things that you have done and accomplished in the kayaks and the bicycling and the gold medal and all those things. And many of those people will be listening to this show. And do you have any advice to anybody who's being challenged by their disability? So something happens to them, they lose, one or two or more limbs, and they just be like, this is it, this is life. I'm going to be sitting in a chair watching TV for the rest of my life. Do you have any advice to them?
Well, I thought I would be that person too when I first found out I was paralysed. So I think with all the things that I've somehow done and achieved, people sometimes maybe separate me from themselves and think, oh, I couldn't do that, or, she's something extra special, and it's just not true at all. Yes, I have a kind of thirst for adventure and for learning and for doing things, so maybe that propels me towards some of the things that I've done, but I very much have all the doubts and fears and experiences that I think most humans probably have. But, whenever I face something, I think I can't do it, I think I'm not strong enough, not good enough, or that it's going to be too difficult. So I have my moments where I doubt myself immensely and really I'm not sure if it's possible. But what I've really learned is that if we just hold that belief or that dream or that thought and just keep trying a little bit every day, and for me it is really important to remind myself what I have, not what I don't have, or what I can do, not what I can't do. So I try and keep that kind of positive language in my head and appreciate all the things that I have every day. And it is incredible what we can do if we live like that and think like that. I'm completely surprised. I look back at some of the adventures I've had and things that I've done, and I can't believe I've done them either. Like, it seems so remote and so hard to believe that I've done them. But yeah, so I think anyone can do anything if they put their mind to it and they believe and they try hard and they have good friends.
For sure. So is there a place or a thing that you haven't done yet that's on your list? So what's next for you in your journey?
Well, I have got a project at the moment called Quest 79. It began in Rio because, there's a whole joke around the number 79 that was going with me anyway, but then I happened to win the 79th medal for Britain in Rio, and number 79 has become this quite special number for me. I realised that I'd taken journeys at 79 degrees east, west and north, so Tibet, Patagonia and Greenland. And 79 degrees south is in Antarctica, and it's a place I've always wanted to go. So I've set myself this challenge, Quest 79, to travel to 7 continents and have 9 big challenges or big rides. And I'm challenging other people to take on their own Quest 79, whatever it might be. So 79 is also the atomic number of gold. So my kind of strap line with it is find your inner gold. And I realised my challenge of travelling to 7 continents and doing these 9 big things is on a different scale to where some people may be. For me, once upon a time, the challenge of getting out of bed and pushing around the hospital grounds was a huge challenge. So I want people to try and stretch themselves and do something which helps them discover something for themselves, discover something new about themselves. So their own Quest 79. And at the same time, I'll be embarking on mine, which will hopefully involve having an adventure in Antarctica. So right now, lying on a sofa in Spain, it sounds really scary, and I don't know how I'm going to do it.
That's really cool how you've encompassed those numbers into everything. That's pretty awesome. All right, so in closing, if someone wants to get in touch with you, or they want to send you some encouragement or get involved in their own personal 79 challenge, how would somebody get in touch with you?
So on my website, it's just my name, so Karen Darke, Karen for Karen, and Darke is DARKE.com. And there's a link there to the Quest 79 project and an explanation all about it. And people can send me a message from that website as well. So we're also trying to raise £79,000 for charity. So everything is on there and all the details about how to get involved, take on your own challenge, or support the things that I'm up to.
Excellent. Well, I'd like to thank you again for being a part of this week's Barefoot Bushcraft Radio Show. And again, you can reach our show through iTunes and around various places around the web. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me as part of it. Thank you.